Hello everyone and welcome to the biology lecture series, and today we'll be discussing the topic reproduction. Alright, so initially I will give you a brief introduction about the reproduction, how can you define the reproduction, and then we'll study about the type of reproduction. Okay, so there are two kinds of reproduction. First is asexual and another one is the sexual reproduction. So we'll be studying about all of these. So let's start with the meaning of reproduction. Okay, how can we define reproduction? So reproduction, it is the ability of the living organism. Okay, so the characteristic of living organism, or you can say one of the characteristic of living organism, is that they can reproduce and they can produce new living organisms which are similar to them. Okay, this is how you can define the reproduction. So it is the ability of the living organism. So non-living organism, do they show reproduction? No. So living organism, they show reproduction and they produce the new living organism, means they produce the progeny. Okay, or you can say they produce the offsprings. Alright, they produce the young ones, you can say. Okay, you can say the child also, anything also. Alright. So reproduction is the ability of living organism to produce new living organisms which are similar to them. Okay. Now it is one of the important characteristic of the life. Clear? Now what is the purpose of the reproduction? So reproduction is aimed at multiplication and perpetuation of the species. So because of reproduction, new progeny or new living organisms are produced. That's why you can say reproduction is aimed at the multiplication of the species. By the multiplication of species, what will happen? There will be increase in the number of the species. Okay? There is increase in the number of species. Okay? As well as reproduction also provide the stability to the species. Clear? Now, in other words, it proves group immortality by replacing the dead individuals with new ones. Okay? So what happens due to reproduction? It replaces the dead individuals with the new ones. So it is the part of the life. Okay? So first will be the birth, and then the living organism will carry out its life processes, and eventually it will undergo senescence and death. So the dead organisms or the dead individuals, they are replaced by new ones with the help of reproduction. Now what are the basic features of reproduction? First is the mode of reproduction vary in different organisms. So different organisms, they have different mode of reproduction. We'll talk about this in the upcoming slides. Okay, so there are two kinds of reproduction, asexual as well as the sexual reproduction. Okay, so the mode of reproduction, it differs in different organism. Clear? So if we talk about the lower organisms such as bacteria, they have different mode of reproduction, and if you talk about the higher organisms such as humans, they have different mode of reproduction. Clear? Now, but all of these have certain common features. Okay, although the mode of reproduction is different, but all these different reproduction processes, they have some points in common. And what are these points? First is the replication of the DNA. So, replication of DNA means you can say synthesis of new DNA. Okay. Synthesis of the DNA is known as replication of the DNA, means new DNA is synthesized, and this new DNA will be incorporated in new cells. Okay, clear? Next is the cell division. So cell division also occurs whenever reproduction is taking place. Okay, next is the formation of reproductive bodies or unit. So for reproduction, sometimes in some organisms, some reproductive bodies are formed. Alright, if you talk about humans also, they have specialized reproductive structures. Okay, testes and ovaries. Clear? Now, next point is development or reproductive bodies into offerings. Okay, so these are the basic features of the reproduction. Development of some reproductive bodies also. Okay, clear, into the offerings. The next is animal reproduce in a variety of ways. Okay, the first is the asexual reproduction as well as the sexual reproduction. So you can say reproduction is characterized into first is the asexual reproduction and second one is the sexual reproduction. So we'll talk about first asexual reproduction and then we'll talk about the sexual reproduction. Clear? So I'll give you a brief idea. In asexual reproduction, only one parent is involved. Okay? One parent is involved means it is uniparental. It is uniparental. Okay? And what is happening? Here the offerings which is produced. Okay? Offerings. Okay? Or you can say the young ones. Alright? The young ones or the progeny or the new individuals which are produced. So these are genetically identical to the parent. Okay? They are genetically identical to the parent. Okay, so this is what is happening in the asexual reproduction. Now there are different modes of asexual reproduction also. We'll talk about that also in upcoming slides. So broadly you have to remember asexual involves one parent only. Okay, so that's why it is known as uniparental. And the offerings which are formed, young ones which are formed or the progeny which is formed, it is genetically identical to the parents. Means they are clones. Okay, so the offering produced are similar to each other as well as they are similar to the parent. Okay, let's take an example of fission in bacteria. Okay, so this is a kind of asexual reproduction. What happens in fission in bacteria? So if this is one cell, it divides into two cells. Okay, so one of the feature of reproduction was cell division. So here you can see what is happening. Here cell division is happening. Okay. So this is a basic feature of reproduction. And if cell division is happening, we can also say replication of DNA is also taking place. Alright, means synthesis of new DNA is taking place. Clear? So here, this is the parent cell. And this is the progeny. Alright, this is clear. So these progeny or the offerings or the new ones, these are similar to each other. And also they are similar to the parent. These are similar to parent as well. Now, these progeny, these are known as clones because they are genetically similar to each other as well as to their parent. Clear? So this was about the asexual reproduction. Now we'll study about the types of asexual reproduction, and sexual reproduction also we'll study in the later lectures. Now what is asexual reproduction? How can we define it? So the production of offerings by a single parent without the formation and fusion of gametes is called as asexual reproduction. Now it is most primitive type of reproduction, so it is quite primitive. Okay, so asexual reproduction is quite primitive and it takes place in primitive organisms. Okay, It takes place in the primitive organism which have very simple it has very simple you can say it takes place in primitive or simple life forms, and these simple life forms have very simple structure. Now it ensures rapid increase in the number. So this is one of the feature of asexual reproduction. There is a rapid increase in number. Again, if you take the example of fission in bacteria, so you can see the cells are dividing, and they are dividing at a very fast rate. Okay, so example you can write E. coli bacteria. So E. coli bacteria, its doubling time is 20 minutes. In 20 minutes, it will get double. Okay, or you can say the life cycle is just 20 minutes. If we talk about humans in which sexual reproduction takes place, you see the life cycle is around, you can 70, 80, it is completed in, or you can lifespan of the humans is around 70. Okay, so here the doubling time is just 20 minutes. So it doubles in 20 minutes. This is the parent cell. It will double in 20 minutes. Clear? This is what? This is the parent. And these are the progeny or the new ones. Clear? Now let's move on. Now let's study about the occurrence of the asexual reproduction. So asexual reproduction occurs in protozoans. What are protozoans? They are unicellular eukaryotes. And examples of protozoans, you can write amoeba. So amoeba is a protozoan. Alright. And in some animals such as sponges, coelentrates. What are coelentrates? They are aquatic invertebrate animals such as jellyfish. Alright. Now certain worms, and asexual reproduction also occur in certain tunicates. What are tunicates? They are the marine invertebrates. Clear? Coelentrates were aquatic invertebrates, whereas tunicates are marine invertebrates. Or they are also known as sea squirts. Clear? And they remain attached to the surface. Okay? These organisms, they remain attached to the surface, such as the rocks. So they remain attached to surfaces such as the rocks and the docks. Now, it is absent among the higher invertebrates and all vertebrates. So asexual reproduction, it is only occurring in the primitive organisms such as these, and it is absent in the higher invertebrates, and it is absent in the higher invertebrates and all vertebrates. So what are invertebrates? That lack the vertebral column. And what are vertebrates? Organisms that have the vertebral column as well as the skeleton. These are known as the vertebrates. Clear? Now let's talk about the next slide. Now let's talk about the type of asexual reproduction. So asexual reproduction, it takes place in the following principal ways. Okay, first is the fission. So it is the simplest form of reproduction in which unicellular organisms either divide into two or many organisms. Okay, so either they divide into two or many organisms. I've shown you how the bacteria divides. Okay, fission we have already talked about. One cell it divides into two or many organisms. Clear? So in bacteria, fission takes place. So we can say bacteria multiplies by fission, which is a type of asexual reproduction. And you can see what is happening here. There was only one parent involved. Okay, there was only one parent involved. Clear? Now, here it is of two types. Fission is of two types. First is the binary fission. Now, what is binary fission? It is a type of reproduction in which the nuclear division is followed by the appearance of a constriction in the cell membrane, which gradually deepens inward and divides the cytoplasm into two parts. each with one nucleus. So this is how binary fission takes place, and finally two daughter cells are formed. And example of the organism where binary fission takes place is amoeba. So here what's happening in this type of reproduction? First, there is a nuclear division. So nucleus divides first, which is known as karyokinesis. So karyokinesis is, karyo means nucleus. So this is the division of the nucleus. Clear? And this nuclear division is followed by the appearance of a constriction in the cell membrane. So there is a appearance of constriction in the cell membrane, which gradually deepens. It moves inwards and divides the cytoplasm into two. All right. So what is happening? If this is the cell, what is happening? Initially, there was one cell and there was a nucleus here. Then what is happening? This nucleus divides into two. All right. And then there is an appearance of the constriction, which grows inwards. Okay, it is growing in this direction. And what is happening? This constriction goes inwards, and then two cells will be formed, which are similar to the parent. Okay, so these are the two daughter cells. These are two daughter cells. Clear? This was the parent cell. Okay, this is the appearance of the constriction in the cell membrane. Clear? So next is the multiple fission. What is happening in the multiple fission? So sometimes the nucleus divide several times into many daughter nuclei. Okay, so many daughter nuclei are formed. Okay, so nucleus is dividing here multiple times. Now the daughter nuclei, they arrange at the periphery of the parent cell, and a bit of cytoplasm around each daughter's nuclei. Okay, it is present. Now nucleus develops an outer membrane, and finally the multinucleate body divides into many daughter cells. So this occurs in plasmodium. Clear? Okay. So here what is happening? First, again there is a nuclear division. Means there is karyokinesis. Karyokinesis means nuclear division. Okay. Here the nucleus divides several times, and again the nucleus will arrange at the periphery, and around the nucleus a bit of cytoplasm will accumulate. And then what happens? Nucleus develop an outer membrane, and then the multinucleate body, which is also known as the senocytic body. So multinucleate body, okay, is also known as senocytic body. Okay, it divides into many daughter cells, and this multiple fission is seen in plasmodium, which is a protozoan. Clear? Now next is the budding. Next we will talk about budding. So here we are talking about the various, you can say, methods of asexual reproduction. So we were talking about the fission. Now we'll talk about the budding. Then we'll talk about the fragmentation. Okay, and then we'll talk about the vegetative reproduction, micropropagation, and then spore formation. Clear? So budding is the second mode of asexual reproduction. In budding, what happens? Formation of the daughter individual from a small projection, which is known as a bud, and which arises on the parent body, and this phenomena is known as budding. Clear? So in hydra, you must have seen. Okay, if we talk about the hydra, if this is the body of the hydra, an external bud develops here. Okay, from the body. And these are the tentacles of the hydra. I'm drawing a very rough sketch. Okay, if this is the hydra, there is a bud, okay, that arises on the parent body. Okay, and the daughter individual, they are formed from this small projection known as the bud. Clear? Now, budding is of two types. First is the exogenous budding. It is also known as the external budding. So in this, what happens? The bud arises from the surface of the parent body. Okay, and this is seen in the hydra. Whereas there is one more budding known as the endogenous budding. In here, what happens? Bud arise inside or within the parent body. And such type of budding is seen in the sponges. Now, this a note I have given you. So during the process of the budding, the bud remains attached to the parent body so as to derive its nutrients. Okay, so nutrients are derived from the parent body. Okay, but as the bud matures, it gets detached from the parent body. Clear? So why the bud remains attached to the parent body? Because it acquires nutrition from the parent body. All right. Clear? So next is fragmentation. What is fragmentation? So it is a type of asexual reproduction or the regeneration ability of the organisms through which they replace their lost part. Clear? Now in this process, an entire new organisms can grow from certain pieces, okay, or cells of the parent organisms. Such as, so this kind of fragmentation is seen in flatworms. Clear? So here what is happening? Entire organisms, okay, it can grow from certain pieces or cells of the parent organism. So this is a kind of regeneration only. Clear? Now let's move on. Next is the spore formation. Now what is spore formation? It is the process of reproduction most commonly found in the fungi, in some cocci and bacillus bacteria. Clear? So here reproduction is by the formation of spores. Asexual spores are formed. Now what happens during this process? A structure known as the sporangium is formed first. Okay? In this structure, means in this sporangium, the nucleus divides several times and each nucleus with a little trace of cytoplasm forms a spore. Okay, so these spores, they are formed within the sporangium. And these spores are then liberated out and develop into a new hyphen. Okay, so these spores are then released. They are liberated out and they develop into new hyphae. Okay, they develop into new hyphae. Example is rhizopus. So in rhizopus, what is rhizopus? Rhizopus is a fungus. Okay, and fungus, you know, it is made up of, or the fungus is made up of mycelium. A fungus consists of what? Mass of hyphae or network of hyphae, that is known as mycelium. Okay, this is known as the network of hyphae. Clear? So the spores, they are released from the sporangium and they develop into new hyphae. Clear? This is how the asexual reproduction takes place in fungus by spore formation. There is formation of the spore. Okay, this is clear. Now let's move on. Next one is the vegetative propagation. In vegetative propagation, what is happening? So this is the type of reproduction found in higher plants in which a new plant is formed from vegetative part of the plant such as root, stem and leaves. Okay, so here new plant is getting formed. Okay, and this type of reproduction is seen in higher plants, you can see, where the entire plant or the new plant develops from the vegetative parts. What are the vegetative part? Roots, stem as well as leaves. Clear? Now vegetative propagation, also known as vegetative reproduction, which is the kind of asexual reproduction. These are of following type. First is the cutting. So what happens in cutting? So this is very common method of vegetative propagation practiced by the gardeners all over the world. What happens here? So in this process, or it is the process in which a vegetative portion from the plant is taken and is rooted into the soil to form a new plant. So this kind of reproduction, or you can say the cutting method is followed in the propagation for grapes, sugarcane, and some other plants. Clear? Here what is happening? The vegetative part of the plant, it is taken and it is rooted into the soil, and the new plant will emerge from that part. Okay, so these plants can be root, stem, or leaves. So here what will happen? Adventitious root will arise. Okay, so what are adventitious roots? Roots that arise from any other region, okay, other than radicle. So usually roots, they arise from the radicle. Okay, but if roots arise from any other part other than radicle, these are known as adventitious roots. Clear? Next method is layering. So in layering, what happens? In this process, the development of adventitious root is induced on a stem before it gets detached from the parent plant. So this kind of layering is seen in mango and roses. Clear? Now again, layering, it is of three types. First is the mound layering. So here what happens? In this process of layering, the lower stem branch of the plant is used. Okay. So the stem branch, first you have to remember, a stem branch is used, and that too, the lower stem branch is used. Now, first of all, the leaves are removed from this stem, or you can say the branch. Then what has happened? Then it is bent, okay, close to the ground. So it is bent then, okay, and then it is pegged and covered with the moist soil in such a way that its growing tip remains above the solid surface. Clear? Now this packed down branch is called as layer. So that's why this method is known as layering. Now what happens? After a few days, the covered portion of the stem, it will develop the roots. Now this stem is then detached from the parent plant, okay, and is grown separately from the parent plant, okay, and it develops into a new individual. Example is jasmine plant. Now this is an image showing you the vegetative propagation by layering in jasmine. Okay, so here you can see the branches of the stem. So this is the stem. Here the branch of the, so these are the branches. Okay, branch of the stem. They are, you can say bent, and they are pegged. All right. They are covered with the soil, and the tip remains, you can say, outside the soil. Here the tip, okay, it is outside the soil. Now what is happening here? You can see these roots are being, start arising then later on, and then this branch is detached from the parent plant, and it develops into a new plant. Here you can see formation of new leaves, and the roots have also arise. So these roots should be adventitious roots, means they are arising from a region other than the radicle. Now this growth, okay, you can see the this growth means formation of adventitious roots as well as these leaves. This growth can be induced by either tonguing or ringing or notching. Clear? So here a note I have given you. The formation of adventitious root in a layer can be hastened by injuring the okay, we have to injure the layer. Okay, how can we injure the layer? So this injuring will promote the growth of the adventitious roots. Okay, so this can be done by a method known as tonguing, ringing. What is ringing? When we remove a ring of a bark. Or by notching. Again, what is notching? When we make a small cut in the branch. Okay, so because of this making a cut, as well as by removing the ring of the bark. Okay, this ringing is also known as girdling. Okay, so because of these three methods, what happens? We make a small cut, okay, or we remove the bark of the ring in a ring manner or in a ring fashion. Okay, so this hasten the process of formation of the adventitious roots. Next is the air layering. It is adopted in those plants where stem cannot be bent to the ground, and in this process, the stem is girdled. Again, what is girdled? The ring of the bark is removed. All right. What is happening here in girdling also? If this was the stem, okay, if this was the stem, then what happens? Because of girdling or ringing, so here the portion of the bark is removed, or you can say we have removed a ring of a bark. Okay, we have removed. This is known as girdling, or you can also say ringing. Clear? Here the bark has been removed. So we can write bark removed. Now, then what happens? Then it is covered with moist moss or the cotton and wrapped with a polythene sheet to preserve the moisture. Now, after a few weeks, adventitious root developed from the injured part, and the branches along with the roots is then separated from the parent plant and planted to grow into a new plant. Examples are orange and the pomegranate. Clear? So this is the image showing you the air layering. Here you can see formation of adventitious roots. Okay. Here, ring of the bark is being removed, means girdling is being done, and the entire, you can say, this part is covered by the polythene to preserve the moisture. Clear? So this is an image showing you the method of air layering. Now next is the grafting. So this process of joining together of two different plants in such a manner that they live as one plant, this is known as grafting. So here what happens? Out of the two plants, one is rooted in the soil and is known as the stalk. The other part consists of a small shoot bearing one or more buds. It is known as scion. Okay. Now their union is carried out in such a way that their cambium must overlap with each other, and this is done in plants such as mango and roses. Okay. So one part is known as the stalk, another part is known as the scion, and they are, you can say, fixed together. Okay. They are fixed together so that they live as one plant. Okay. And what should be the condition? The cambium must overlap with each other of the stalk as well as the scion. Clear? So this is known as the grafting. Next is the micropropagation. Now it has now become possible due to recent techniques to produce a large number of plantlets from a small piece of tissue taken from the shoot tip or other suitable plant parts. Now this method of propagation is known as the micropropagation, and it involves the process of the tissue culture, and this is done in orchids, ornamental plants, okay, and some other plants. Clear? The next is what is the significance of vegetative propagation? The first is it is used to propagate a plant in which viable seeds are not formed. Okay, so seeds are very important, and seeds, they ensure the progeny or the formation of the progeny, but in some plants viable seeds are not formed, and we can use this vegetative propagation, which is a type of asexual reproduction, for, you can say, formation of new individuals. Okay, or in plants where very few seeds are produced. Examples are orange, pineapple, and banana. Now, vegetative propagation helps us introduce new plants into the new areas where the seed germination fails to produce mature plant due to change in the environmental factors and the soil. Clear? The next is the vegetative propagation is very rapid. It is easier and the cheaper method of multiplication of the plant, and by this method, a good quality of a race or the variety can be preserved. And most of the ornamental plants are propagated through vegetative propagation, such as rose, tulip. Okay. The next one is the parthenogenesis. So this is very important. This is the formation of, you can say, fruits without fertilization. So there is no fertilization here. Now, this is the kind of modification of the sexual reproduction in which an egg develops into a complete offsprings without fertilization. Or you can say here, there is a formation of the entire individual without fertilization. This is known as parthenogenesis. Okay. So here it is monoparental means, okay, it is mono means one. You can also write it as uniparental. So it is monoparental. That is, the fusion of gametes does not occur and only a single parent give rise to the new individual. Okay. So usually what happens in the sexual reproduction, two parents are involved and they produce gametes. Okay. One will be the male gamete. Okay. So this is the male gamete. Other is the female gamete. Okay. And they fuse together, okay, to form the zygote. Clear? So this is what happens in the sexual reproduction, formation of the gametes. But here in the process parthenogenesis, there is no formation of gametes. There is no formation of gametes and only one parent is involved. And here what happens? Entire organism develop without the fertilization. Clear? So one of the method, so by this method, the fruits are also developed. Okay. So seedless fruits can be developed, and that is known as the parthenocarpy. Okay. Development of fruits without fertilization, and in this process seedless fruits are developed. Okay. Clear? Now what is the significance again of asexual reproduction? It brings about multiplication of the species. Okay, and it does not play a role in the evolution as no variation is introduced into the new individual. Clear? So these were the significance of the asexual reproduction. Okay, hope you enjoyed this session. We'll talk about the sexual reproduction in the next lecture. Thank you very much for listening.